during the roll call for attendance, so that, as well as for the conversation, so that the public is clear about who's on the commission. We're going to have one member join virtually, and I don't see her on here. So thanks for your patience. Oh, sure. I'm just going to welcome us. Morning, everybody. A lot of familiar faces here, and thanks everybody in the audience for attending. I'm Mike Kelly. I'm the executive director here at BMC. This is the first meeting of this commission. This has sort of been evolving for the last 2 or 3 years, and I know a number of you were part of a work group that our board formed last year that really led to the creation of this. So thank you all for participating in this. This is a really important step for the region, and we are happy to have everybody here today. As part of my duties, I'm here to say that we have a packed agenda today, and one of the first items is going to be a chance for the commissioners to introduce themselves. And what I'm about to say is going to sound like it's directed directly at Aaron Marchio. It's really not. It's for everybody. But if we could keep that portion, Aaron has a long and illustrious bio. If we could keep that portion efficient, it'll help us get to the rest of the agenda and get to the really important things we're here to talk about. So thank you all for being here. We're very excited to get this started. And on behalf of our board, thank you for volunteering to do this. And I think I'm going to introduce, who doesn't need to come up here, Assistant Secretary Tony Bridges from MDOT, who's MDOT's representative here. For people who are not aware, the bill was drafted and filed last year by then Delegate Bridges, who really helped shepherd all of this through and has done a great job helping to lead this in his new role at MDOT. So Tony, if you want to say a few words and then we can keep moving on.
Do I have to be short as well?
You can set an example any way you want.
Well, I am not going to set an example because I'm going to speak about this for a little while, not too long. But first of all, thank you to BMC for hosting this meeting today, the first meeting of the Baltimore Regional Transit Commission. Thank you also to all the members, volunteers who have decided to join this commission. It's been a labor of love, I think, to get to this point. For me, it's been at least 5 years that, you know, I started as a delegate, former delegate, talking about regional transit authorities and commissions. And but even before that, it started before me. And I always like to give a shout out to the comptroller, Brooke Learman, when she was a delegate. She also looked at the MTA and ways to help the MTA and thought about doing sort of an oversight board when she was delegate. And so even before I became a delegate, this conversation had been going on. So much to the point that we are here today to start the first Baltimore Regional Transit Commission. This commission really is a commission that, in my mind, when I thought about this commission, it started out thinking about the red line. And I've debated this with some folks before, but I honestly believe that when the red line was canceled in the past, there wasn't really sort of an advocacy group or organization of folks that really came out to really fight for the red line the way that I thought it should have been fought for, so that it wouldn't have been canceled. You know, some people have different thoughts about that, but you know, maybe if we had a group like this Baltimore Regional Transit Commission, we wouldn't have had to fight so hard to make sure that the red line actually moved forward. So I'm excited that we are at the point where we have this Baltimore Regional Transit Commission that's been established to really look at the things that are happening with the MTA. You know, to review some of the processes, you know, the modes that we have with the MTA, and to make sure that we're also advocating for the things that the MTA needs. This is not to, you know, talk about how, you know, we all know that there are challenges with the MTA, but what do we need to do in order to make sure that the MTA has the resources and the support that it needs? And that's what I really, when looking at the legislation and putting this together, that's what this is all about. So I'm excited to be able to talk about the MTA today and to have the Administrator Holly Arnold here to talk about the challenges, the resources, the needs, as well as the great things that are also happening with the MTA as well. And so with that, I am done, talking about this sort of background and history, and just to let you know, if you didn't know, I already talked about it, I'm the assistant secretary, but I was also former delegate, Tony Bridges, that represented Baltimore City, the 41st district, and along with BMC and many members of the Regional Transit Commission, Dr. Chavis and others, we all sort of banded together to make recommendations on the MTA and other recommendations as well. But this is one of the recommendations that came out of our work group. So I'm excited that we're getting started today, and I'll stop talking there because I'm sure I'll say a few more things later on. Turn it back over to you.
Thank you. Good morning and welcome again to the inaugural meeting of the Baltimore Regional Transit Commission. I'm Don Halligan, staff here at BMC. And I want to thank you for your willingness to join in and begin to take on this important task, since Assistant Secretary mentioned. I've had the pleasure of speaking with most of you, not all of you, unfortunately, individually about the charge and legislative mandate of the commission as it begins its role in reviewing and evaluating policy and budgets and performance of the region's transit systems. I appreciate your enthusiasm and eagerness to get started. And as Mike mentioned, we have a packed agenda, so brevity will be a necessity and appreciated. This said, if you want to learn anything more about any of the topics that we're talking about today, let me know and we'll get you a briefing. The first order of business is for the commission to elect a chair. And a chairperson is really crucial for providing leadership, setting strategy, managing the meeting, functioning, effective decision-making, and positive public perception, all that good stuff. So in order to make the first meeting as productive as possible, I put out a call for interest and nominations to the members here for serving as chair on January 18th. I received one expression of interest and 5 other nominations for the same person, John Laria. I received, so since we're currently operating without bylaws, I'd like to ask a member to call for a motion and a second to open the nominations from the floor for chair. Do we have any?
Move that we open nominations from the floor.
I second.
Moved by MDOT and seconded by Commissioner Walker from Baltimore County. Call for a vote.
Sure, all in favor? I think we can just do it by voice.
Yes.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it.
Great, thank you.
Oh, is that it?
Welcome, Mr. Chair.
So much less dramatic.
It doesn't need to be painful.
No. All right, well, thanks. Thanks, everybody. Well, I'm John Laria, and it is truly a privilege to play this role and to work with so many of you. And I have a couple things I want to say, although I also will be mindful of the time. But I actually thought we would start by just quickly going around and asking people to do a quick self-introduction, who you are, what your affiliation is, your jurisdictional, and it's written on your sign. And if you just answer just one sort of quick question, which is the sort of why you either sought or accepted the opportunity to serve on this commission. I think that would be a good place to start, just so we can hear a little bit from everybody about their kind of entry point. And then I've got a couple things to say, and then we got a lot to talk about. So Scott, may I start with you?
Sure. Scott Spencer, representing Baltimore City. I work with the HC Foundation as a assistant director for local policy. The reason I volunteered to do this, I've worked in transportation probably over the past 20 years in one form or another. But at my foundation, we believe that all kids do well when their families do well, and they do well when they live in healthy communities. And right now, there are impediments to that, and transit and access to opportunity being one of the most principal impediments to that. And so being a part of this commission, hopefully we will be, I'm able to be supportive and bring the voice of those folks and their needs and their desires and their aspirations to this table, to our considerations, to our deliberations, and to our actions.
Marcus?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Marcus Moore, Director of Transportation Parking for the City of Annapolis. I've been in transit, like Scott, for a long time. I spent a bit of time with rail and with bus now. I accepted to be on this commission because I think that transit is very important to all of us, not just those that have no other choice, but making transit, public transportation, a viable option to those that can go another way. Just to open up those avenues and make sure it's understood that it is a way of the future.
Thank you.
Morning, everyone. My name is Arjen Van Andel. I represent Anne Arundel County. I'm the chair of the Transportation Commission. I'm also a volunteer for an organization called APTF, which is American Public Transportation Foundation, that is aiming to make sure that public transport is also promoted amongst young people and getting a better workforce in public transport business. And I work in daily life for a company that provides like planning and scheduling software for the bigger transportation systems in the world, basically. My reason for accepting this is that I find like transportation is basically the core of viable cities, and I want to make sure that hopefully I can contribute to making sure that we have like options available for everyone that can travel as alternative to a car, basically.
Mike?
Good morning. I'm Mike Netzer. I represent Baltimore County. My current role is the Vice President of Community College of Baltimore County. I'm pretty shameless about why I'm here. It's about workforce development for me. You know, education is the gateway out of poverty, but if you can't get there, and Aaron and I shared some kindred souls about walking, what I call walking the last mile to get to work after you've taken 3 or 4 buses to get there. It's a very difficult journey for a lot of people. So I'm happy to be here, and I look forward to working with everyone.
Good morning, Aaron Tramarchio. I represent Baltimore County. I've come to the commission with experience in state and local government, but for the last 10 years, I've been working on the redevelopment of Sparrows Point and Trade Point Atlantic. And I've seen firsthand the importance that a connected transportation system has on economic development, specifically what we've been doing at Trade Point and trying to connect jobs to communities. And this is a very important role that I think that we can play in kind of providing some insight here. So it's great to be part of that. And like Mike, you know, workforce is absolutely critical to a very successful city and region. And I live in Upper Fells Point, so I have that perspective too. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Deandra Walker. I'm the Director for Department of Public Works and Transportation for Baltimore County, and I represent Baltimore County. And I have a particular love for transit and transportation, having been around the transportation industry probably for the last 20 years, being at MTA in a number of positions, and then in Prince George's County running their transportation, and now Baltimore County. So I have a particular love for transit.
Tony Bridges again.
No, come on.
No,
No, go ahead.
I'm gonna be very brief. I said everything already, but the one thing that I didn't say is I'm representing the Secretary for the Maryland Department of Transportation, who will be joining these meetings in the future.
Lester.
Good morning, everyone. Lester Davis, Baltimore City. And I would say there's a historical and then a present. The historical, I spent about a decade in Baltimore City government, where I served as a staffer in both the legislative and executive branches, where I had a hand in some of the biggest transportation decisions of the time, both on the infrastructure and capital investment, and got a chance to see up close and personal how real thoughtful investments in public transportation can make a difference. And then, you know, I currently serve as an executive at Care First Blue Cross Blue Shield, where we use a stat to kind of drive home the point that 80% of what affects folks' health, my health, the folks in this room health, your family's health, is really environmental and circumstantial. So it's how you move through space and time, access to public education and transportation is obviously at the top of that list. And if you own a car in this region, you can get to 100% of your jobs within 1 hour, no problem. You rely on public transportation, that number goes down to about 9%. And so for us, principally concerned with eliminating the social drivers of health and the health disparities that we see, transportation factors in a critical way to that. I think similar to what we heard from Scott and Mike, you know, education is a big one, but if you can't get to those opportunities, then you're behind the 8 ball a little bit. So that's my why, and happy to be here.
Good morning, everyone. Celeste Chavis. I'm with Morgan State University and I represent Baltimore City. I've been at Morgan State for over 11 years now. I'm the chair of the Department of Transportation. So I spent a career both creating engineers who are conscious of multimodal transportation, which is not always the case in traditional civil engineering curriculum. And I spent all my time here being an applied researcher for the city of Baltimore. So I'm happy to serve as an academic perspective on the committee.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Luis Cardona, representing Baltimore City. I'm the Senior Director of Neighborhood Development for the Baltimore Development Corporation, which is the economic development authority of Baltimore City. There I oversee our initiatives on the eastern half of the city. I also sit on the Baltimore City Hispanic Commission and have spent over 10 years as a transit and cycling advocate in this city and in Boston prior to that. One of the things that brought me to the commission somewhat uniquely is especially given my role at BDC, where I also direct Hispanic business development for the city. It's the only demographic Hispanics that are growing in Baltimore City and who increasingly rely on transit to access jobs and do not have access to cars. I think everybody knows Baltimore City needs as many people as it can get. When those people show up here from wherever they show up, they need to use these systems to be able to access not just 1, but 2, sometimes 3 jobs and support their families as they grow and become new Americans and new Baltimoreans. And anything that I can do on this commission to support that influx of people to Baltimore City is a personal reason of why I said yes.
Well, good morning. Michael McMillan, President Business Agent for Local 1300. I'm representing the public sector employees, operations and non-ops for the Maryland Transit Administration. I have 29 years with the same company, MTA, affiliated with it, starting as a bus operator. Being in the president position for ATU, we were always sitting on this side, outside. And actually to be invited to have a seat at the table this time is a great honor because it is important for me because with my negotiations directly with MTA and being the sole negotiator with MTA for the public sector employees, it's important that we understand this portion of it about the last funding. It's been informative, things that I didn't know, I know, and I can use that at the bargaining table, with the administration. And also be able to explain to our members as well, there's a bigger part of it than just a union fighting for disciplinary action or just fighting for other benefits, but how important it is to know where the funding is coming from and who is coming from at that time. And it's been a great help. I also got plugged Tony Bridges just one time because his father sat in the same seat that I'm sitting in now. So he's a child of MTA now from the labor side and from the administration side. So, but that's what it is for me, and that's why it's important. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lakey Boyd. I'm representing Howard County. So my affiliation in Howard County is I'm a resident. I've also worked at Columbia Association, Howard Community College, which really has given me a lens into a lot of who riders are of transit. My why is my background is community economic development, city planning. I've worked in local government. I always worked around the truly multimodal elements, so a lot on ped and bike, but also shared micromobility, microtransit, a lot of alternate solutions to layer. While I'm relatively new to this region, I think that the why of connecting people to opportunity is what transit always comes back to for me. So I'm certainly hoping to bring that lens.
Holly, why don't you guys just say a quick hello, and then we'll get to you in a bit. Just a quick introduction. I think everybody knows.
Sure. Yes, I'm Holly Arnold. I'm the administrator at MTA, so I look forward to working with all of you.
Kenneth Good, Deputy Chief of Staff. I'll be providing staff support to the commission.
And Tony St. John is on.
She is, yes.
Can we ask her?
Yes. You need to unmute.
There you
There you
Thank you. I wasn't being allowed to unmute there.
Oh,
Lee St. John, I am a Baltimore County resident. I work in the city and I'm the executive director of the Baltimore College Town Network. And in terms of the why, our network is comprised of 13 colleges and universities across Baltimore City, across Baltimore County. And we know that transit remains critically important for our students who rely on it to get to school, to get to jobs, to get to internships. And also for faculty and staff, we also run our College Town Shuttle, which goes among several of our campuses and area destinations. I'm so glad to meet you all. I'm not in person today. I'm out at CCBC on their Essex campus because we just finished a board meeting here, but hope to meet you all in person soon. Thank you.
I did get a notice from Simone Johnson from Baltimore City, who is running late.
I see Simone, I do know her from her day job is as the assistant city administrator, one of leadership in the mayor's cabinet. And we are, I guess I should just mention, awaiting another Howard County appointment. The original Howard County appointee, Bruce Gardner, and many of you know, was tapped to rerun or run again the agency he ran successfully some years ago, the Maryland Transportation Authority. So we'll look forward to another Howard County. So just a couple words for me, if you don't mind. John Laria, I'm a lawyer in Baltimore and have been involved in smart growth work for a long time and in transit advocacy, transportation advocacy also. For a time now, I've been co-chairing the Baltimore's Transit Future Initiative, which is a joint effort of the Greater Baltimore Committee and the Greater Washington Partnership, which I think represents, and I'm thinking a little bit about what Delegate Bridges said, represents an opportunity, represents a commitment from the business and institutional community to not let the red line cancellation or anything like it happen again. I think I agree with the delegate that while that sort of advocacy, that broader advocacy, whether it be from a commission like this, whether it be from the business and institutional community, whether its absence, we may not have gotten the red line had we leaned in better, but we sure as heck weren't going to get the red line if we didn't lean at all. And I'm afraid that that happened and shouldn't happen again, and I think it will happen again as we press forward. So it's a privilege to play this role, and I hope to do it justice and look forward to working with everybody. I do want to thank briefly at the outset Delegate Bridges, who's not allowed to say anything in response, but Dr. Tony, thank you very much. We did serve together, and he chaired the Baltimore Metropolitan Council work group that led to the legislation, as you heard. So he is sort of the godfather of the BRTC and a great leader, and it's great to have him at MDOT. I also want to acknowledge sort of preemptively Baltimore Metropolitan Council, which under the statute is providing staff support. We're very fortunate to have Don Halligan and Mike Kelly. Don, I'm going to ask you just to say a minute about your own background, which I think is highly relevant because of all the work that you've done. So if you would.
Sure. I think he wants me to say that I've spent 20 odd years at the department, retired in 2015, ended up getting a job here at BMC, and still have it has my passion and interest doing transportation planning work. Prior to that, I spent 10 years in local government. I spent a little over a year during the O'Malley administration as assistant secretary at the Maryland Department of Planning. Could go on, but
it's an extraordinary resume. So we're lucky to have Don and the BMC staff, which are great professionals. And I also want to say, this is maybe an odd thing to say, preemptively thank the MTA, Holly and her team. There's going to be, and I'll talk about this in a moment, clearly some back and forth. There are going to be some questions. There may be some tough questions, but fundamentally, we are all on the same team here. We are all trying to drive regional transit in Baltimore forward, and no one feels more strongly about than Holly, who's just done an excellent job. I see her on the news. It seems like every other night, either announcing something new or explaining something not so great. But she's been very, very visible, and I think we're lucky to have the leadership at MTA. So just a couple of thoughts before we kick off. We're really at an inflection point here. We have a governor who is deeply, deeply committed to improving transit in Greater Baltimore, whether it's more broadly speaking, whether it's specifically the Red Line. And of course, that follows a governor who seemed not to be interested in that at all. So it's an important point. We have legislative leadership that understands the importance of transit and is also committed to a better transit future for this region. We have extremely capable leadership at MDOT, at MTA, and we have local leaders, many of whom are appointed commissioners here, prepared to stand up for their constituents. So we are at an inflection point, and yet everybody here knows that we have a multi-billion-dollar deficit in transportation funding, which I think most people would believe, and I happen to agree, has a disproportionate impact on the Baltimore region. And of course, I should say parenthetically, we are grateful, like everybody else is, for the $150 million restoration that the governor put announced the other week. But we need acceleration, not restoration, and there's a big gap. Restoration is helpful, but it doesn't get you to baseline, and it certainly doesn't accelerate. And you see, even yesterday or this morning, there was an announcement of how the MTA has to deal with the still remaining impact after the restoration on commuter bus service. Excuse me, by announcing that it's going to have to make some hard choices. And those are not choices that we should be making. We should have that commuter bus service and more, not and less. So we find ourselves in a difficult spot. And so the need's never been greater, the gap has never been bigger, and the current resources are clearly not up to the challenge. So the Train Commission, which everybody knows about, and I happen to be privileged to serve on, is supposed to make recommendations to remedy this big financing gap. But I don't see us sitting by idly and waiting for other people to solve this problem. I mean, we have to recognize what we can do and what we can't do, but we're not going to wait for this funding crisis to be solved by others. And we can't raise money ourselves, obviously, but I think we can set a bar for what forward-looking, responsive, and ambitious transit looks like in the region. And hopefully this commission can drive policy and drive investment in that direction. We do have a statutory charge, which I'll get to in a moment, but I'll just say fundamentally, the way I see it is two big pillars: advocacy and accountability. And on accountability, we clearly will expect accountability from MTA. And I have no doubt that they will be accountable. But remember that this is accountability that has never previously existed. And I forget the number, Don, is it 40 largest transit? There's a number of how many of the largest transit entities in the country.
I believe it's 50, yeah.
Whatever it may be, but we are the only one without any sort of board, till today, without any sort of board or commission or oversight or opportunity for this kind of collective input. That was bad, and this is an effort by the state to change that. So as the delegate said, then delegate said, BRTC was created to give greater opportunity for local input, for other stakeholder input, to increase transparency and decision-making. We're going to do that in areas of policy, in areas of finance, in areas of operation, and we'll do that in the way that the statute provides. And I'll I'm not going to read the statute, although you should if you haven't, but just for everybody who's sort of, watching, that means requesting and reviewing information in the annual attainment report, performance goals and metrics, evaluating other performance measures. It means reviewing and commenting on service change reports, major service change proposals. It means reviewing and approving any updates to the Central Maryland Regional Transit Plan. It means reviewing and commenting on the capital needs inventory report. It means reviewing local transit plans and services in the region to ensure coordination between local transit services and the MTA. And last but certainly not least, it includes reviewing and commenting on the administration's annual operating and capital budget request for the Baltimore region, including all of the modes that MTA is responsible for as part of the development of the drafted final CTP, a process that we are right in the middle of, and which I wish we had been around a little bit earlier because now we're trying to catch up a bit as the CTP is rolling out, and we're going to do the best we can in the short time remaining in this process and in legislative session to have an impact. So those are the statutory charges, and we will do that and hopefully more in partnership with MTA and all the other stakeholders. As important as accountability is, The other half is advocacy. We need to advocate for a financial investment in MTA that is commensurate with MTA's mission. And I think that's an important role for us to play and immediately on the agenda. I want the state to know that we will support and we will fight for MTA and for the hardworking MTA staff who work there at all levels. And importantly, most importantly perhaps, we will advocate for MTA's riders, our fellow Marylanders. My hope, and this was alluded to a moment ago, I think by Commissioner there, my hope is that one day we will have a transit system that is a mode of choice, not a mode of necessity. That's not to say that it is now entirely a mode of necessity. That's clearly not the case, but it is too much a mode of necessity for too many people. And we want people to use it because it's the best way to travel. So that's an ambitious goal, but that's what real urban transit systems should aspire to, and that's what we should be able to do here, so that it's a mode of choice, not just a mode of necessity. But right now, as you've heard from everybody, and it was great to hear this sort of validation, right now our first obligation is to the MTA customers for whom it is a mode of necessity, who rely on the system out of necessity to get to work, to get to school, to get to essential services like food and healthcare and the basic stuff of life. And I'm sorry to say, and it's no reflection on the people who are working so hard to do it, but the state has not invested sufficiently in the past, certainly not in the recent past. And the immediate absence, and I say immediate because I hope this will resolve, but the immediate absence of the means to make big investments in the transit system is letting those folks down. So that's what we need to change. And together we're gonna start to peel the onion and figure out what we can do to contribute to that and be part of a statewide initiative led by the governor, led by legislative leaders, led by local governments, and of course, MDOT and MTA leadership. I hope and I think we can do that. We're starting today, so I'm thrilled and privileged to be here in this role. I'm glad to have this great group of people around the table and looking forward to getting to work. So thank you all very much for allowing me to give some thoughts. And now I'll turn to the first, or the next item on the agenda, which I believe, if I have the agenda correctly, is remarks from the MTA administrator. Let me just tee this up while Holly is walking up to say that we've asked Holly to do sort of two things today. One is to talk generally, and this is about what she's about to do. It's a little bit of an MTA 101, right? It's sort of, and I know that for some of you this will be remedial, and for some of you this will be new, so but we to set a baseline, and also for the benefit of folks who might be watching who are not as familiar. This is sort of like, here's a look at MTA overview. So we'll do that. We've asked Holly to walk through that. She will then, after we hear from Don Halligan about some overall Maryland funding, Transportation Trust Fund, Administrator Arnold will be back to talk a little more specifically about MTA budget and the financial challenges that we face, which have been very much in the news. So I'll turn it over once, thank you, I'll get you going there.
Testing my ability with Zoom here. Sorry.
So while Don is pulling that up, so yeah, as background, so I am the administrator of MTA. I have been with the agency for 11 years now, so I've had the opportunity to work with many of you across the table who have been previously at MTA or in your other roles. We also have a number of MTA staff that are joining us here today and remotely, so you will not always hear from me in the future. There'll be other folks who are going to briefly present on many of the things that we're doing at MTA. So MTA team, can you raise your hands? So we've got a lot of folks here who will be able to answer questions in the future. And so for today, my presentation is, pretty high level. I just want to level set of who we are as an agency, what we do. We have a fairly big mandate. I think even those who are familiar with the agency sometimes forget all that we are responsible for. So just want to start there. I'm happy to take questions probably throughout is best. So please let me know.
So if you have we'll figure this out as we all work together, but if you have a question, just raise your hand. We'll try and do it that way, try and keep it a little conversational. If it's something that you think is more of a broader, more general question that makes sense to wait till the end, please wait. But if it's really topical and it makes sense to say, well, do you mean this or do you mean that or whatever, please just raise your hand and we'll try and do it that way.
Sorry, we're gonna figure out this check here. I just have to do it now.
Pages there.
There, page in between each page. No, we're missing.
Apologies. Load this. Yeah. Okay.
It's missing the page.
It's missing the page. I gotta reload.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just doing programs out there too. Just business.
Alright, so maybe I'll just start while Don is figuring out the check here.
Sorry.
We're missing some pages for whatever reason. But so, and you will see this on the slides when they do come up. MTA, we're a pretty large organization. So we have 6 service modes that we currently operate. So we have our core service, which most people think of here in Baltimore, our bus system, light rail, metro, and our mobility paratransit, which is the complementary paratransit service that we do provide. We also have on the statewide side, MARC commuter rail, which there we go, and commuter bus. So mentioning previously, one of the only agencies that is state-run, we're also an agency that's fairly unique in how many different types of modes that we operate. It's hard to find kind of peers that operate that many different modes. We are, by ridership, the 15th largest transit agency in the US as of 2022. We have about 3,400 employees. 80% of those are union represented, and the majority are those kind of frontline workers, operators, and mechanics. We own and are responsible for maintaining a lot of assets. So our asset value that we're responsible for is $12.6 billion. So that's all the things that we've bought and built over the years. Our annual operating budget for FY24 is just over $1 billion, and our 6-year capital budget is $4.5 billion. And there's some details about each of the modes down below. Just a very brief history of the agency. So we've been around for a long time, existed previously as the Baltimore Transit Company, which then became part of the state government and reincorporated in 1970 as the Mass Transit Administration, and then later became the Maryland Transit Administration. Some key dates that you can see there, we began our Metro subway service in 1983, so it just hit 40 years last year, and we're going to be doing some celebration of that over the coming year. Light rail, similarly, we hit 2 years ago, celebrated our 30th anniversary of light rail opening. We've been providing school service for school students since 1996. And then again, you can see, in 2017, we did a network redesign here at Baltimore City. We also launched the Purple Line. And then finally in 2023, the governor announced the relaunch of the Baltimore Red Line. Just a quick agency overview. We are headquartered here in downtown Baltimore. We also provide funding and statewide assistance to the locally operated transit systems around the state. So, some of you are here representing those lots, as we call them today. We also serve as that primary transportation service for Baltimore City school students. So about 30,000 students ride our system every single day. We have some special buses that go to and from the schools. We also have a police force. So we have over 150 officers and 80 civilian employees that ensure that the entire system is safe. So it is a big charge. They're responsible for not just here in Baltimore, but also if something's happening at a station on the Brunswick line down in Montgomery County, they're also responsible for that. So it's a big responsibility for our MTA police force. And we're constructing the Purple Line down in Montgomery and Prince George's counties. I know you all know why public transit is important. I heard a lot of you say it today. Every time I get in front of a mic, I'm going to take the opportunity to sell. But basically, you know, it's important to the economy. And 9 out of every 10 trips has a direct benefit to the economy. That means someone is going to buy something. They're going to work. They're spending money from that trip. The American Public Transportation Association estimates that for every $1 invested in public transit, $5 is returned long-term to the local economy. And nationwide, for every 1 billion invested in transit, that creates 50,000 jobs created or sustained. It's a key factor in business site selection. I think we've all seen that as businesses are looking where to locate. Public transit is key there. There's also environmental benefits. So typical transit trip emits 55% fewer emissions than riding alone or ride hailing. And the carbon output from public transit has improved over time. So it's 26% lower in 2018 than it was in 2005 and continues to get better. So really just more people riding transit helps us to meet Maryland's climate sustainability goals. In terms of safety, it is safer than driving alone, nearly 10 times safer per mile than driving in a car. Congestion benefits, I love this stat. So if you took every MTA trip and put those people in a single occupancy vehicle, the cars would line up from here to Atlanta. There are a lot of cars that are taken off the road. So even if you're not riding transit, you're benefiting from those who do. And then obviously the equity benefits, I've heard that from all of you. Affordable, accessible public transit can help to reduce race and income disparities. Specifically here in the Baltimore region, it represents over 10% of commutes in Baltimore City. 40% of the region's residents live within a half mile of a train station or a quarter mile of a bus stop. And 50% of the jobs are accessible by bus or rail. This is something we covered in the regional transit plan with goals of increasing that, right? Like we need to do better. We do serve major points of interest throughout the region and the state, 800,000 jobs, 200 employment centers, grocery stores, hospitals, and we do have commuter services hitting DC and some of the other regions. In Baltimore, about 30% of the households do not have access to a vehicle. Over 80% of MTA's core bus riders do not have access to a vehicle. So for many of those folks, we are their only option. And so that's why it's important that we get it right. And we serve over 94,000 households without access to a vehicle. Over a third of our core bus riders have an average household income of less than $20,000 a year. So it's important that it's affordable for them. And then owning a car is expensive. Again, the average cost to own a car in Baltimore City is estimated to be $14,000 a year. So if you have the option to use public transit, it saves you a lot of money. So I'm going to go through each of the modes just very quickly. So our core bus system, again, that's what most people are familiar with. You see the buses out there running around. We have 4 tiers of service that we provide. CityLink, which is the kind of backbone of the network. It's the high frequency, the colored lines that you see. Local Link is more kind of our coverage route, so providing neighborhood service, but connecting to the CityLink lines. Express Bus is our service that is more morning and evening peak, kind of getting people into jobs in the morning and then home in the evening. And then we recently launched Quick Link this past August. It's a refresh of the Quick Bus that was done previously. It's a limited stop service that runs all day, but does save a bunch of travel time. On the Quick Link 40, it's about 25 minutes of travel time savings over the underlying CityLink Blue or Orange. We have nearly 50 million rides in 2023. It's about 80% of our MTA ridership do use the bus. We have 800 buses in our fleet, give or take, operating out of 4 bus divisions throughout Baltimore City, more than 4,000 bus stops that we're responsible for, and we are in the process of transitioning to a zero-emission bus fleet. We also have the light rail line. So light rail, we have 57 miles of track, 33 stations going from Hunt Valley to Cromwell and the BWI Airport. two maintenance facilities, more than 3.5 million rides in 2023. And on the vehicle side there, we're nearly complete with the midlife overhaul, and we're planning for replacing those vehicles with modern, accessible low-floor vehicles. Metro is often the forgotten mode. I cannot tell you how many people have said, wait, you have a Metro? We do ride it, it's fantastic. It's a heavy rail line, 34 miles of track, 14 stations from Owings Mills to Johns Hopkins. You can get from Owings Mills to Johns Hopkins in 30 minutes. There's no better way to do it. We have a couple maintenance and operations facilities up in the Northwest, provided nearly 2 million rides in 2023. And we are in the process of replacing that fleet and received the first of the new vehicles that are undergoing testing now, and will go into service in 2025. We have a comprehensive mobility paratransit system. So this is a legislative required service for people with disabilities who are unable to use our fixed route system. In 2023, we did over 2.6 million rides. We have 3 contractors that assist us with providing that service and about 5,500 vehicles. Our MARC service is our commuter rail. We do have 3 lines, 2 that serve Baltimore, the Penn line and the Camden line. There's also the Brunswick line that runs between Washington, DC and out actually into Martinsburg, West Virginia. We're fairly unique in that we do not own the tracks that we operate on. We're what's known as a virtual railroad. So we own the vehicles, we own some of the stations, but the tracks are owned by Amtrak on the Penn line and CSX on the Camden and Brunswick line. We fully contract that out as well. So Amtrak is our provider on the Penn line, and for Camden and Brunswick, it's Bombardier, or now Alstom, I should say. 202 miles of commuter rail services and 42 stations throughout those 3 lines. We also have a commuter bus system. It's a fairly large, comprehensive commuter bus system that is that kind of peak period only limited stop bus service. We have 1 route that provides more of that regional service. The 201 runs hourly, but the rest are kind of peak period weekday only. We currently have 36 routes across Maryland, 24 serve DC, the remainder serve Baltimore. It is contracted out to 6 different providers and did 1.2 million rides in 2023. I mentioned previously that we are part of the state. So we are one of the modal administrations under MDOT. You can see here kind of where we fit in, reporting up to the Maryland Department of Transportation. There's a number of questions on workforce and kind of what we're doing workforce wise. So MTA has 3,600 pins allocated to us. Right now, 3,400 of those are filled. So we have 177 vacancies, about a 4.9% vacancy rate. That has come down tremendously since where we were this time last year. So we've dropped that nearly in half of where we were, and we've been pushing really hard to continue to hire. We have collective bargaining agreements for a number of our employees. So ATU Local 1300, Mike is here today, represents our operators and mechanics. We have Local 2, which represents most of our administrative staff. And then we have 2 police unions. 1859 represents the officers, and then a newly formed union that we're currently in negotiations with that will represent our police sergeants. We've really been focused on hiring over the past year. I know reliability is key and crucial, and so we need operators to be able to run the services that we have. So we've really stepped up how and where and when we recruit. You know, previously we kind of had people coming to us. We didn't need to do a lot of recruitment. And so now we're actually going out and doing a lot more of it. We've done advertising campaigns, we've done on-site hiring events where we have MTA staff there so folks can come in, see what a bus division looks like, get their questions answered, and kind of work their way through the hiring process. We've also focused on some changes to our union agreements to help us hire. So in December 2022, we came to an agreement with 1300 that had a 10% increase in the wages for our operators. And then this past May, we did a supplemental agreement that basically decreased the time it took to get to top rate so that we could bring our new operators in at a higher rate. So new operators today are coming in at nearly $26 an hour. So it's much more competitive than it was before, and it's really helped us to hire. You know, our application pool has increased by over 200%. We've doubled the number of training classes that we're doing, and we've been able to hire much more quickly than before. We're also really focused on employee engagement. So we want to get people in the door, and then we also want them to stay. And so we're trying to become an employer of choice, show folks that we appreciate them, that we respect them. And so we do a ton of employee engagement. We have an InReach program. It's been nationally recognized, where it actually helps to improve our communications between frontline employees and management. I do a program that's called the Half Day with Holly program. Employees can invite me out to spend a half day with them and see some of the work that they do. It's been a really fantastic way for me to see some folks who are a little bit unsung heroes and share their work with the rest of the agency and with the public. We also have an employee wellness program. So we coordinate with the union's healthcare provider for quarterly events throughout the agency where we focus on nutrition, fitness, mental health, well-being. We had chair massages this past December. And so just really focusing on how do we make people want to be at work. And then our big one every year is Transit Worker Appreciation Week. We've taken Transit Worker Appreciation Day and turned that into an entire week-long celebration of the employees that we have at MTA. Some questions on how we interact with our riders and the technology that we use. So we do a lot as well to interact with our riders. One of the things that we realized during COVID is that, for many of our riders, again, they didn't go away during COVID, they stayed, they continued to ride, and we recognize the importance of our service to their communities. And so we're really trying to make sure that we're continuing to give back. So we participate in community events. We're at AFRAM. We march in the Pride Parade. We've been in the Baltimore Christmas Parade. And so we continue to give back in those ways to the community. We have a number of apps that employees can use, or that riders can use, the transit app, you can buy your fare on Charm Pass. And we also have information on our website, a rider guide for those who are new to the system and want to know, how do I ride the system? We have a bike guide if you want to take a bike on the system. It's very nerve-wracking the first time you do it. And so showing people how to do those things. And the requirements for this commission was also looking at some performance metrics. So I wanted to go ahead and start sharing some performance metrics for the agency. This is also in alignment with the customer experience dashboard that MTA rolled out yesterday. So we've been reporting some performance metrics for since 2018, but our data sources, our real-time information has really matured a lot since then. And so we took that opportunity to roll out our customer experience dashboard. We also created a customer experience office representing the importance of the rider and the voice of the rider in the agency. We hired our very first rider experience director. Roxana is here today. So Roxana started a couple weeks ago. She's been out riding the system, talking to riders. She was at the city for all four this past weekend. So we're trying to take the stories that we get and tie them to the data. I think that the governor says quite frequently, data-driven, heart-led, and that's what we're trying to do with this customer experience office. This data tells us one thing, but we need the story behind it. That said, I am going to dive into the data. So first is our service delivery metric. This is our service delivery by mode. So essentially, how much of our scheduled service actually went out every single day. So you can see the data here by month. Our goal is 99.5%, right? We want all of that service every single day to get out there. We're not there yet. We are just above 90% on bus. We're a little bit closer on our rail modes. There's a number of things that play into this. Operator availability is a big one. Bus availability is another one. If we have operators, but they don't have the buses to drive, that creates an issue. Folks calling out, but this is a big focus for the agency and one of the things we're going to continue to focus on for this year. Next is on-time performance. So we do have on-time performance by mode here. We have different goals based on the modes that we have. So our core bus goal is 80%. Our rail modes are a little bit higher. You can see that on the rail modes, we're generally kind of at or pretty close to our goals. On the core bus side, we're not there. So we do service changes a couple times a year to really focus on-time performance. We're doing one this coming Sunday, and the goal of that is to adjust our schedules to better reflect kind of what's actually going on out on the street. Traffic since COVID, I think, is maybe finally stabilized, but it took a while to get to the point where we feel like we have a better sense of how to build our schedules around that. And so that's what we're doing this Sunday, and we're hoping to see some improvements in on-time performance there. Real-time availability, so this is on the apps that folks use. So if you use Transit app or if you use Google Maps to look at your trip, how often is real-time information available? Again, we want 99% here. We want you to be able to pull it up and see yes, that real-time information is available. Again, a number of things kind of go into this. If there's issues with the GPS unit on the buses, it can fail. But we're fairly close again here on the rail modes. Our bus is falling a little bit further behind. In light rail, we had some issues with the overhauled vehicles that were causing real time not to work, but did make some improvements. And then finally, real-time prediction accuracy. So yes, you have real time, but is it accurate? So we take a look at what it looks like 30 minutes out, and then compare that to what the actual departure time is. So again, our goal is 90%. We're not quite at our goal. And so we've got a team, the customer experience team, that's working on that over the coming year. On the mobility side, we have a unique metric for them. It's our fixed route equivalency. It's a fairly wonky term, but basically what that means is if you were to take this particular trip on our fixed route, so on our core bus, our subway, our light rail, how long would it take you? And then does the mobility trip take you that same amount of time, right? So if it takes me 30 minutes to take the bus from my house to work, will it take me about the same amount of time on mobility? Our goal there is 85%. We're just shy of that as of right now. So we're going to continue to focus on that. Vacancy rates, so some questions again, how many vacancies do we have? What are we doing to fill them? Again, very proud of the work that the team has done over the past year to really focus on filling vacancies. So I've showed our overall and our operator vacancy rate. Numbers for January are even better. Like we're really kind of diving in and getting to the point where it's a very low vacancy rate for our operators. And then finally, ridership. That's why we're here. We're trying to get more riders on our system. It always looks lumpy. Everyone's like, well, why does it drop in December? Because for a lot of folks in December, they stay home for a week between Christmas and New Year's. And so that's a full week of folks not riding. But it typically rebounds in January, and we're kind of seeing that again already. Our ridership has increased year by year. So, it was a 14% increase from 22 into 2023. We have a goal of at least a 5% increase again this year, as we want to keep getting more people on our system. And then you do have in your packet just a one-pager on some MTA accomplishments. I do want to give a shout out to the team. There are a lot of challenges that we have, but we've had a lot of successes over the year, and I want to make sure that we are celebrating those. In terms of growing the system, we did relaunch the Red Line. We published our North-South feasibility study. We have memorandums of understanding with Delaware and Virginia for expanded MARC service. Purple Line is continuing construction. We hit 63% of construction on the Purple Line. And we launched our Quick Link 40. We've been investing in our workforce. Our vacancy rate is down, operator wages are up, we're doing on-site job fairs, and we've developed an internal leadership program where we had our first class of graduates. On the grant side, more than $6 billion coming to the state between awards that MTA is solely leading and partnering on. So it's a huge amount of money coming into the state, investments in transit. And then in terms of modernizing our fleet, on every mode that we have, we're getting zero emission buses, we're purchasing new mobility cars. Our first metro cars are here and are being tested, and we're planning for the future of light rail. So I'm going to stop there, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, the floor is open. Questions? Please, let's take.
So one, thank you for that rundown. It was helpful, and I think good grounding for us as a refresher for those who are aware, and then as I think as the chair said, good context for folks who may not be. One of the things you said early on, I was struck by, and it was that 400% increase for the economic stimulus on the return on investment, the 1 to 5. How should we think about in a time like this, as the chair said, where investments and trying to tell a story of why the investments, and there are a number of places where you're gonna have to invest in the state. But a return like that, if I shared that with any other person managing any other portfolio, then I said, I'll give you a 400% increase in return on your dollar, I'd probably be the best hedge fund manager in the business. How should we think about that, and how is that story told with a state that's gonna be facing challenges? But it's hard to argue with that kind of economic stimulus and return on investment.
No, I mean, I think absolutely, we can't afford not to invest in transit, really is the message that I would have, and I would encourage you to continue to go out and share. Transportation is unique, that it touches everyone's lives every single day. Transit in particular, right? If you're taking the bus, like whether that bus shows up or not is just hugely important to you being able to get to job, to school, wherever you're going. And so, yeah, I mean, that's what we're here for, advocating, is the importance of investing and making sure that people can get to where they need to go and bring that economic development to the economy.
Karen, please. Holly, thank you for your leadership with the organization and the partnership we currently have with TradePoint and MTA. You guys have been doing a great job with Link 63. I have two questions. Regarding the on-time performance, how much of an impact is signal timing and synchronization through the city for the core bus service? And, you know, are there improvements there that we should be at least partnering on and looking at? And secondly, the dashboard and ridership information. I know that Senator McCray has a bill before the General Assembly, Senate Bill 70, and I know you guys are working with him on that. I think are you guys planning on displaying kind of ridership data, just making that public for each of the services that you provide, so that employers and other folks that are interested in understanding kind of what services are used and where they are used?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start with the second one. So the dashboard went public yesterday. You can go on and you can see on-time performance by route. You can see the service delivery by route. Currently we have overall ridership and ridership by mode. We're going to be adding later on ridership by route, so you can kind of see what that looks like. The customer experience dashboard, we're looking for feedback, right? We launched it. We want to keep making it get better. So if there's things that you guys want to see, please let us know and make sure we work that in. Regarding signal timing, absolutely. We do have a great partnership with the city. Our team meets with them every other week. I talk with the DOT director probably at least once a week on kind of issues that we're having. When we have installed transit signal priority on routes, we've seen about a 10% travel time savings. So it does work. It's something that we'd like to do more of. As much as we can prioritize transit, it allows us to bypass cars and makes them for a more reliable service.
But real quick, just as a quick follow-up, in your conversations with Baltimore City, has there been is there a need for an investment in, you know, signalizations, you know, software or technology? Just what's the current, I mean, maybe we bring the city in to have a conversation about that. I'm just curious.
So the city has started an effort to look at signal retiming and signal replacement. I think they have a consultant that's on board now leading that effort. But we have been partnering with them, you know, in a number of corridors that are really important to us. Like we've actually gone ahead and replaced the signals in conjunction with them. So our North Avenue Rising project on North Avenue, there are new signals there that MTA went ahead and paid for. On light rail, we're paying for some signal upgrades there on Howard Street to improve the travel time for light rail. It's a great partnership, you know, definitely more investment needed on both the city and the state level, and we're happy to continue to partner with them on that.
Thank you.
Yes, just had a question about, all right, so I know you're doing a lot of engagement with the employees to try to bring up work morale, and you mentioned also too, like, employees coming to work so you can make sure that you get the service out there to the public. Has the administration looked at, or I know you have, but any other ideas from other transit agencies who are struggling, because it's across the nation that, you know, that's the retention and absenteeism is a problem. Have you looked into what they're doing to improve, and at those systems that have improved in those areas?
Absolutely. So we, you know, regularly meet with agencies across the country. We are in a couple of different working groups with agencies where we share data, share best practices. MTA's absenteeism rate has historically been higher than our peers, continues to be higher than our peers, though others are now kind of struggling with it in a way that they maybe weren't before. So that's one of the things we're trying to change is I think there's some culture of that at MTA. And so our leave and absence management policy, which we are working with you on, Mike, is something we're looking at. We do have in the contract a bonus if there's a certain absenteeism rate that the employees can get. I don't think we've hit that yet, but I would love to. And you know, we definitely partner. I hear you preaching as well, come to work. And so it's just like a culture that I think we all need to work together to fix at the agency.
So,
yes, please.
So let me ask you, Holly, and I think that I saw a number on there about your vacancy rate being at 4.9%.
Yes.
I think that's excellent. I think it's difficult in these days and times to hire employees. I would be interested to know your turnover rate in order to keep it that low. Is there a concern with your turnover rate, and how are you churning to be able to be at the 4.9%? And then in addition, Can you talk a little bit about your ridership before COVID and now your ridership after COVID? Because I see that it indicates that you're 14% higher than what you were. But at one time I was hearing that we were down 60%. And I'm just curious to see where we are now, and where we are now, what are you all doing to get the ridership back to where it was pre-COVID?
Yep, absolutely. So let me start with the churn. I can get you specific data at a future meeting. Anecdotally, I will say our training classes, we're losing less people throughout the classes. Like we're, starting with a group and more of them are actually staying on. Similarly, I think the higher wages are making a big difference to encouraging folks to stay on. We also offer a lot of overtime. You can make a really good living as an operator at MTA. And so we've been selling that point and selling that, hey, these are the benefits of working at the agency. In terms of ridership, so we are overall as an agency, 70% of where we were from the pre-COVID ridership. Pre-COVID, we had seen some increases, especially like weekend service on our bus that was starting to increase. Unfortunately, COVID kind of hit everyone. MTA was hit less hard than many of our peer agencies across the nation, which again speaks to the importance of transit here in the city. If you take out our commuter modes, so if you just look mostly here in the city, so bus, light rail, metro, mobility, ridership is about 75% of what it was. Our commuter roads are kind of dragging us down overall.
Two different questions. One, when you mentioned total asset value, that includes land?
Yes.
And how much land does MTA hold?
I'm gonna have to get back to you on the specifics.
And then separately, last week we were at the forum and we heard some voices of people who were blind and trying to achieve, get service. And I was just wondering, how do you measure your service with that population of folks?
We work closely with National Industries for the Blind as we schedule our routes. They're a great partner. They participate in some of our forums. So they ride our core service quite a bit. They're also able to ride mobility service. So that is a huge focus. We also do testing of one of the things that was mentioned was like the system wasn't making announcements. So we have folks who go out and test that on a regular basis, kind of blind shoppers to ensure that it is working. It's a big focus of the agency to make sure that we have that better accessibility.
I'm going to give Simone the last, well, if you insist, it's okay, but maybe we'll give these two commissioners the last two questions. So we can move on and we can come back to any or all these topics. Could you also, since you weren't here for the intros, just do a quick intro of who you are, what your role in the city is and so on?
Sure. So I'll do the really quick and easy intro. My name is Simone Johnson. I serve as the Deputy Chief Administrative Officer for the City of Baltimore. I've known many of the people up here for many, many years. And even Holly as well. I'll start with my favorite color is orange. My birthday is May 19th. I am wife to Troy and mother to Tristan. I like to always say that because we often believe that we are indeed our work and we aren't. I've lived in Maryland for many, many years, came for college, stayed for grad school, been here thereafter, worked for the state of Maryland for 25 years before joining the city in May 2021. I had the opportunity to serve in various roles across the state of Maryland. I worked at MTA one time, served there in 3 different capacities, various modes across the MDOT family. Many, many moons ago, I don't want to tell my age, I worked in the State House during the Glendinian administration, so that was a long time ago. I've worked in housing for the state. So my background is city and regional planning. So I've worked at State Highway, MDOT HQ, MTA, aviation twice. So been around a long time and I look forward to collaborating with each and every one of you. And so we continue to uplift transit in our region. And so I'll pause there. And my question is a piggyback to DeAndrea's question around employees and the vacancy rate. I'm curious to know if you're finding that hard to fill positions fall within that rate, and if they are, what are those job classifications? And what are we doing creatively to attract for those if they are hard to fill positions?
Yeah, that's a great question. So some of our harder to fill positions are the more specialized ones. So we have folks who work in our radio shop, so you need like a FAA license to be able to do that. So we're trying to be more creative about how we advertise, where we advertise. We're working with community colleges quite a bit, reaching out in ways that we maybe hadn't before, of like, hey, you got recent graduates, people are training to do this, send them over. We've got some good jobs our way. We have partnered with the union again in hiring events and are just really kind of pushing to bring more folks on board.
Thank you.
Last question, please.
Yeah, one of my questions, let me put up my notes here. If I look at the dashboard that you're presenting, it's also, of course, very operational focused, but also there were some questions here about like how many people do have access to public transportation and whatnot. Is there also visibility on maybe on a more longer term periods? You're saying like how many people can reach the transit, can reach their jobs, for example, within a certain wait time of their buses, for example? Or what is the comparable travel time compared to cars? Because then we can probably see like how competitive is it what we need, and I can probably also highlight like where do we need more investment and whatnot, but I don't know if those numbers are also presented at certain times.
So I'm not sure that's a good fit for the dashboard, because that's more like how we're doing as an agency. You're speaking to things that impact the regionally. But I do think that is a great opportunity to, pivoting to the regional transit plan, which this group will participate in. We have some stats like that in the regional transit plan, and I think that's a great goal and something that we can update in that document.
Okay, well, I think we'll just close this part of the discussion for now and come back to any or all these topics. So now we're gonna sort of pivot into funding issues. We're gonna start with Don Halligan, who's gonna talk at a sort of high level about the Transportation Trust Fund and general capital budgeting. I think there was an attachment if you want, and then we'll come back to Holly to talk more specifically about MTA budget. I will say that, Holly, just to give you a heads up, you'll sort of get to this, but I would like you to sort of do the 3 things that keep me up at night part of this. It's probably insinuated in what you're doing, but I think it would be useful for us to sort of hear like what's really are the big things that we should know you're struggling with at the moment. So that's just heads up. Don, please.
Okay, so I'm gonna provide you a brief overview of the Transportation Trust Fund. That's the fund the state has to fund transportation. And the Consolidated Transportation Program, that is a 6-year budgeting document. So I'm gonna try to make this fast because I know this is a snore for most people, but it's important for, I think, the mission of this body to understand and have a baseline understanding of those things.
Before you get to the substance, one sort of housekeeping note. We are scheduled from 10 to 1, 3 hours. I think that was clear to everybody, I hope. We will finish by 1 for sure, but probably not much before that. We will discuss what happens, are we 3 hours, are we 2 hours, et cetera, but we knew there was a lot here, so we asked people to allocate. So just I will be patient. No, you're fine. I just wanted to make sure we're managing everybody's expectations. Go ahead.
Yeah, and just to clarify, I did tell folks 2 hours, but we have so much to cover, and I think just to stand this group up and give everybody a good understanding of the issues and of the MTA certainly, and of budgeting and their mandate, I think we need to spend a little bit more time today. So I hope that's all right. The Transportation Trust Fund is a non-lapsing special fund of the state. It provides funding for transportation purposes throughout the state. It was created in 1971 with the Department of Transportation to fund their business units, MTA being one of those. It allows the state to have a lot of flexibility and diversity in meeting its transportation needs, challenges. The TTF receives revenues from certain taxes and fees according to statutory formulas. it, off the top, money from the trust fund go to things like the highway user revenue that fund local governments throughout the state. Goes to WMATA to help pay their share, our share, Maryland's share of the Washington Regions Compact. And the balance of that trust fund, after those things are taken off the top, goes to the department to use throughout its business units and is doled out through an allocation that the Secretary's office provides. So it funds, the trust fund funds State Highway Administration, the Transit Administration, the Port Administration, the Maryland Aviation Administration, and the Motor Vehicle Administration, and as I mentioned, WMATA and some local systems. If the revenue in the trust fund is from these various taxes and fees up here, motor fuel tax, vehicle registration and titling fees, they're two of the big ones from the state side. Operating revenues, federal aid, which is this year the biggest, bonding, proceeds, corporate and income taxes, and other sources like rental car tax, these smaller things. The trust fund is the primary funding source for MDOT to fund the transportation network. And it faces, as we're learning, a bunch of challenges, rising costs, declining revenues, aging infrastructure, competing demands. And as the chairman mentioned earlier, the Train Commission is looking at these issues in a larger context and trying to begin to make recommendations to the state on new revenue sources. So I'm going to move to the CTP. That is the Consolidated Transportation Program. It is a 6-year capital budget and is a key part of what's known as the State Report on Transportation. That's a report that MDOT sends to the General Assembly and Governor every year as part of the budget. CTP contains projects and programs, so it's not just projects, it's programs they fund across the department, from each modal administration. And includes, and the CTP does include WMATA's portion and how they expect to use the money and they get, and the Transportation Authority, which is tolling agency. Briefly, this is the State Report on Transportation. It is made up of 3 parts. 2 of those are of interest of this commission. Those 2 being the CTP budget, the annual attainment report that talks about performance of each of the modal administrations, high-level key metrics for the agency. And it also includes the Maryland Transportation Plan. You saw this graphic a minute ago. It talks about the funds coming into the trust fund and then going out. The dollars come into the trust fund and are distributed first it's debt service, second is operating, and then the capital program gets the balance. This is from this year's CTP, and I apologize for the small graphic here, but it's just to show you generally the sources and uses. Primary source this year is 25% of it. The money received that's coming in is coming from the federal government, so they're highly leveraging the money that's made available to them by the federal government. And going out, it's evenly split between operating expenses and capital expenses at 36%. You'll note that WMATA gets the next lowest portion, which is 15%. This is a graphic the department has used, I believe, at the Train Commission, and may be familiar to you. And it talks about the column on the left talks about when it's the time, And then the steps to develop the program, so you can see it here begins in May when they do a call to the local governments for their priority letters, asking for their local priorities. And to the modes to ask them for what they'd like to see funded next year. In June and July, allocations are made by MDOT. Draft CTP draft budget is released in September. And then the tours start, and the tours are when the department goes out and meets with the local governments and talks about their priorities and what they intend to do. And then the final document is received mid-January every year. We just saw that program drop here, and it's submitted to the General Assembly and the governor. This slide is just to demonstrate the things, the pressures on the department, the criteria that they use to allocate the resources. There's a handout in your package that has a better breakdown of this if you're interested. This slide is a little bit more in depth on the process. I'm not going to get into it because I just kind of covered the main points. Again, it's a complicated process. Each of the agencies have about 100 pages or so. So it's a 600-700 page document. It's intimidating to look at, but it's once you understand how it's assembled, it's pretty easy to understand. Happy to sit down with any of you at any point to go into a deeper dive on how to read it, what's in it. Any questions? Mr. Chair?
Yes, Leslie.
For the sources and use graph, how much fluctuation, I know this year it's the 25% federal aid, but how much fluctuation is either year to year or cycle to cycle for those buckets?
In terms of sources, it bounces between state sources and federal sources. Often it's overfunded by the state in a good year. In a lean year like we're in, I think it's they leverage every penny they can get. So it varies depending upon the economy and revenues received.
Yes.
Is it possible to get the uses, the 36% MDOT operating and 36% MDOT capital broken down by mode?
Yes, I can get you that information.
Yeah.
I couldn't maybe read it so well, but how much of the total sources comes from the state as a percentage?
Well, I guess you mean state like taxes and fees?
Yeah, like incomes, like how much is the state supporting us? And then in the other end, I understand that some of the funds are coming, for example, from the gas tax.
Yes.
And then my next question is, if we're moving to electrification of the network, how will that impact the funding of?
That's
NTA?
part of the issues that's facing the trust fund right now is as non-taxed vehicles like electric vehicles, they don't pay the gas tax, rise. So the number of those go up, you're gonna see less revenue, and that's what's happening. And that is one of the recommendations from the Train Commission this year is to look at creating and updating perhaps even some of the fees that exist for electric vehicles.
It's sort of an oxymoron to tax an electric vehicle.
Real quick, it's probably that I just turned 50, but I can't, could you go through just real quick the sources?
Yes,
briefly?
sure.
Appreciate it.
I'm gonna put my glasses on too.
This is is this in our packet?
It is.
So if you want to look at it that way as well, it's slide 4 on the bottom, although it's just smaller again. But
Yeah. I appreciate it.
And to answer quickly the one question about state contribution, basically it's 75% this year if you do the easy math, right? If you assume that you're talking about federal aid as being the source in. The rest is from state bonds, revenues received from the motor fuel tax is 21%. That's the next biggest one. Titling and taxes, as I mentioned, is the next largest chunk. Titling is 16%, registration is 11%. Corporate income tax is a small thing of 6%. There's some general funds that kind of commingle in this time, and that's one of those things that varies from year to year. That's a 2%. 7% are from operating revenues, 5% from bonds, 3% from other capital sources, which there's a variety of things like the airport has fees, as I mentioned, a rental car fee, those kind of things.
It's maybe a difficult topic, but if you're saying 7% from I have two questions. One is 7% from operating revenues. Is there a possibility to increase that number? I mean, it's always a very sensitive topic, of course, with pricing and things like that. And the other one is in the federal and the state, how does Baltimore contribute as a county or a city? Is there any contribution from those entities as well, or how does that work?
That is sort of one of the other revenues, is when there's a project that the local governments, it's important to them, sometimes they'll contribute, and it isn't always the case, but sometimes they do contribute to make sure the project is done at a speed that they see happen. In terms of raising revenues, I mean, one of the revenues is, say, the port fees, there are dockage fees. The airport, as I mentioned, has some fees. Now, there's transit fees, fares that are fees to the public. So, I mean, there's opportunity, but it has repercussions. So you raise the fare on transit, you might, there's elasticity there, you'll lose some transit riders.
I think ideally, if there's no other immediate question, did you have? Are you okay? Let's have Holly come back up. And because all this is gonna, it's a big Venn diagram, right? It's all gonna sort of merge at some point. So want to get as much information out as possible, see what questions. Let me just also say that, to the extent that commissioners have questions, obviously you're asking them now, and some of them are answerable, some of them we'll get back to you, and I'm sure that people will keep in track. Also, going forward, this is a big learning, there's a lot of stuff here, and some of you start with one level of knowledge, others with other. If you have questions as you're thinking about this, as you're going forward, as you're looking at materials, just send them to Don. Are you the right person? Email to Don, whose email is all over this stuff. Just ask the questions, because chances are other people have them as well, and it will start to, create an information flow. So please feel free to ask any and all questions you might have by writing and follow up, whatever. And we're just going to continue together to sort of build our knowledge base and familiarity with all this as we go forward. It's a complex system. You'll also get to hear at some point about not only the financial stuff, but talk about a sort of Venn diagram, I guess, the intersecting transportation planning documents that exist in the state that have various roles, some nested within others, some adjacent, et cetera. So again, we will work through this together we want to get everybody feeling capable with respect to these things. And so please be forthright in your questioning. Holly, back to you.
Okay, great. And thank you, Don, for the overview at the MDOT level. So again, MTA is one of the modal administrations that receives funding from the Transportation Trust Fund. So I'm going to highlight MTA's budget. It's pretty high level. Again, we're not going to solve all the problems in today's commission. So it's the start of a conversation. I welcome questions, and I anticipate this will be an ongoing discussion as we move forward. I also do want to note we are kind of in the middle of the budget cycle of the General Assembly. So the governor announced his budget January 17th. The General Assembly now has the opportunity to review it. MTA, their budget hearings for each of the modal administrations, MTAs are March 1st and March 4th. They will be streamable online, so you're obviously welcome to watch those. And then I think we'll be meeting right after that, so we can have a more in-depth conversation as well. So starting out, just a budget 101. This gets confusing even internally, so I just wanna make sure that we're kind of sharing the difference between our two budgets. So we have an operating budget. This is developed 1 year at a time, kind of looking for the year ahead. Funds are appropriated and spent in the same year, so it's a July 1st to June 30th fiscal year. Pretty short term in nature, and these are items related really to that daily operation. So it's our labor expenses, it's fuel, anything that is kind of needed to run the system that short term basis. We also have our longer term capital budget. So this is 6 years in nature. It's part of the MDOT Consolidated Transportation Program. It's a little bit more fungible, so funds can be moved within that 6-year period as projects speed up, as projects slow down, as priorities change, we can make adjustments. Again, it's that longer term in nature, and it's things that have a useful life of more than 2 years. So if it's something that's gonna last longer than 2 years, that is included in our capital budget. So it's when we buy our buses, it's when we build buildings, the red line are all things that will be in the capital budget. Developing the capital budget, there's a pretty prescriptive process that is done per legislation that we do with MDOT. So we are a portion of the MDOT capital budget. That is what outlines the state 6-year commitment to transportation funding. Every spring, each of the jurisdictions submit their priority letters telling us what projects are a priority for their jurisdiction. Those are considered as well as the needs of MTA. So we also prioritize the available funds that are entering a new year of the CTP. So each year, a new year comes at the end. We have a very data-driven process. I'll talk about our asset management system in a minute, but we prioritize based on state of good repair, enhancement and modernization, customer amenities, and planning for the future. The draft CTP is published each year, September 1st, and then MDOT as a whole, including the modal administrations, go on what's known as the roadshow or the CTP tour each year to talk about the projects in each jurisdiction. The draft CTP is revised based on feedback from the roadshow, and then the final CTP becomes part of the governor's budget, which is then submitted in January, and the legislature has the final say, the review and approve that final CTP. So starting first on the operating budget, so MTA's FY25 proposed operating budget. So this is what has been included in the governor's budget that was submitted in January. So the total is almost $1.2 billion for FY25. We are very heavily driven by service. Obviously, if that's what we do. So 76% of that is labor and contracted services. There's the other category of 13%, which is kind of the other things that go into that. So it's parts and supplies that are short-term in nature, brake pads, tires, things like that, and diesel fuel, kind of the big drivers in that bucket. And then we also provide funding to the lots. 11% of our operating budget is for that lots funding throughout the entire state. The $150 million infusion from the rainy day fund, thank you to the governor, 62 million of that did go towards transit operations. So we were able to fully restore the lots cuts that were discussed, as well as some cuts on the Brunswick line. But we will be making adjustments to our commuter bus service. So 2 days ago, we published a proposal for what that would look like for the changes that would go into effect July 1st, 2024. We're maintaining access in all regions that currently have access. A duplicative service and low ridership service is eliminated in some cases. And we're gonna have public hearings this spring. And there are no service cuts to our core system here in Baltimore. Some just details here again of what was discussed in December versus what you see now. Essentially, everything except for the commuter bus is gonna be fully restored. I do want to note, so our operating costs have increased over time. So it's about I think a 7% over the last 10 years, but in the most recent couple of years, there's been much larger increases as we've had to pay more for our contractual costs, we've had to pay more for our labor costs. All of those add up, and it does compound year over year. So you can see, from 2014 to 2025, basically our budget has essentially doubled in that time. I also want to give the MTA team a lot of credit. We've done a lot better at managing our budget in recent years. You can see for a number of years there, we were spending more than we were actually budgeted. We've really done a good job of focusing on cost controls, making sure that we were budgeting and managing that appropriately, and have been much better at hitting our budget. The primary drivers, again, increased labor costs, inflation, supply chain issues for repair parts and materials. So we've had to change how we buy things quite a bit. So it used to be you could just call the OEM and order 10,000 brake pads. They due to issues that they're having with supply chains and other issues, they're not able to get 10,000 brake pads. So now we're reaching out to 5 different companies to get 2,000 brake pads. So it's increasing the amount of work our team has to do, and there are some cost increases by not having that, but it allows us to get the brake pads in time for us to put the buses out on the street. So we're really prioritizing service as we make these decisions, but it does cost a little bit more. There's also been some rate increases in our access fees for the host railroads. So built into our contracts with CSX and with Amtrak is what's called the American Associations of Railroads, and they do a cost index every year. It's typically in the 5 to 6% range. Last year it was 25%, so it was a huge increase in that cost, and it's built into the contractual costs. We have fuel riders and a lot of and contract cost escalators in a number of our contracts that are driving these. And I want to make clear, this is not unique to MTA. Every transit agency across the country is having these issues, having this discussion. So we're part of that larger conversation. On the capital side, so our FY 24 to 29 capital budget is $4.5 billion. There's a lot of projects in that budget. We have 850 projects that we're working towards. The bulk of the budget does go towards state of good repair, 60%. And what does that mean? What does state of good repair mean? Basically, that's an FTA defined term, Federal Transit Administration. Essentially, like, we keep our assets in a condition that is sufficient for it to operate at a full level of performance. I'll dive a little bit more into asset management in a minute, but 60% of that is going to making sure that we can continue to run the service that we have today. We do have funding for expansion, including the Purple Line and the Red Line. There's about $100 million in the budget for the Red Line to begin the planning efforts there, and the team is moving full steam ahead on Red Line. The Purple Line, there's about $900 million, so that includes just finishing the project. And then once it's done, there are availability payments. And the availability payments are broken down into capital and operating, so you see some of the capital ones in our current CTP. And then there's enhancements to the system. So that includes new things like shelters. It includes the Frederick Douglass Tunnel. It's station improvements, things like that. So there are enhancements, about $400 million of enhancements in our current budget. Due to the unprecedented funding issue, we did take a reduction in our capital budget from the draft to the final of $550 million. And the governor did restore $15 million that is going to go towards state of good repair projects.
Ollie, can you just to make the point, I mean, the impact of out-year reductions in the CTP, which sounds to sort of an uninformed observer like no big deal, we'll just get to it later, actually has current year impact for certain reasons. I just want people to hear that. Could you explain that a bit, please?
Yeah, I mean, so as we plan long-term, with the projects that we have funded to cash flow for construction in 26, 27, we're doing planning now, we're doing procurement now. But unless we have that construction funding that's fully available, we can't advertise, right? I don't want to advertise for a project and have a vendor get a whole procurement ready, all those things without being able to fully move forward with it. The team is doing the best they can to kind of balance and change priorities, but yes, it will have an impact long-term on some of the projects that we want to deliver.
I just wanted to make that point because it's really not intuitive. I mean, if you think of it as sort of this is this year's budget and those are the future year's budget, you think, well, it's just imaginary. It's, it's a planning exercise, and it is a planning exercise, but it's more planning exercise plus because it does have an impact on the current year.
Yeah, I mean, some of the projects that we're working on now, zero emissions bus, like that's 4 years of effort to get us to where we are today. So it is a long-term process.
Thank you.
Can I ask a follow-up
Yes,
question
please.
on that? Because is it made clear in a way for that zero emission, there's a lot of investments that need to be made to go to zero emissions, and there's a commitment from the state basically to go to zero emission. Is there visibility on what those additional costs are and how that basically you don't want to go at the expense of the delivered service? So is there like additional support from the state to make sure that you get like additional funds for infrastructure changes and things like this? Because otherwise you might need to cut services because of the fact that you have to invest so much on your zero emission investment, which is kind of like a policy goal. So I'm curious how the state supports even extra in some infrastructure investments on topics like that.
So we're mandated to purchase only zero emission buses after 2023 per the Zero Emission Bus Act of 2021. We are requesting relief from that for this year's budget to allow us to purchase at least 25%, so we're still gonna transition just a little bit slower. But no, additional funding was not added as part of that act, so we are, taking those costs. And we put out several reports to the General Assembly, they are available, we're happy to share with the group. The cost just to get to, I think, 50% of our bus fleet is about $1 billion. And I think to your point, getting more people on transit really is our goal. Zero emission is great, and I think we should move forward with that for a region, especially a region where, asthma rates are higher, like the climate matters here. And we need to get more people on transit, even if it's clean diesel buses. So asset management. So I talked a little bit about the data that we use, and so I wanted to share just a little bit of our asset management status, what it is, how we've developed it over time. We refer to this when we put out the capital needs inventory every couple of years, and a lot of the data really just comes from this that feeds some of those bigger picture things we talk about. So what is it? It is federally mandated that we have an asset management program, that we publish a plan. It's also just best practice, a good thing to do. When you buy something, you want to plan for how you're going to maintain it in the long term. And for a long time, as an entire country, we didn't do that. So now we're in a much better place to understand that full life cycle cost. So it's a framework to monitor and manage our assets. It prioritizes our funding based on asset condition to achieve and maintain that state of good repair. And we are required to develop plans per FTA. Our program has developed over the course of the past 12 years. So we really kind of started in earnest in 2012. I was in our capital programming group at the time. We got a $1 million grant to kick us off. And the amount that we have grown since 2012 is just tremendous. When we first started, we didn't know what we owned. We didn't know how much it cost. We didn't know what condition it was in. We are now at the point where we are able to not only say what we own, but use a combination of age-based and condition-based from our inspections data to inform our decisions. It's like, what does that mean? So when we first started, we're using basically life cycles. So we would assume if you have a section of track, it's supposed to last 30 years, and then you go ahead and you replace that track. Now, because we have that data from the condition assessments and the inspections, we're able to be more efficient with our dollars. So for example, it says the metro track should last 30 years. So we're going in, we're starting to do these projects based on the condition data. We're learning that only the curved track really needs to be replaced. The straight track is in better condition. And so we're able to change what we do for our projects to be more efficient with how we spend our money. On the opposite side, light rail, we have some track that should be lasting 25, 30 years. And because of the way that system was built, built with no federal money, very quickly, we have crosswalks where they should be lasting, again, 25, 30 years, and it's only lasting 10 or 12. And our condition data allows us to know that and make those better decisions. And again, the accuracy has continued to improve. We have a number of guiding documents that are available on our website, diving into the asset management data. You can see condition ratings by mode. So these categories, guideways, systems, vehicles, stations, and facilities are from the FTA categories. So that's kind of how they break things down. You can see here by mode what the condition rating is. So it's a 1 to 5 scale. So for FTA, if it's in 5, it's basically excellent, brand new, just went into service. 1 is considered poor condition. FTA considers anything under a 2.5 to not be in a state of good repair. So that's kind of how we identify what that backlog is. And I do want to be clear that the system is never fully going to be everything at a 5, right? Like there's always going to be things in varying degrees throughout the systems. I think our bus is a good example. You don't want to buy 800 buses all at one time, right? Like that would not be a good way to manage the system. And so we buy 70 buses every single year. So that means you can see here, our vehicles are at a 3.26. That's about where we would expect it to be. So the overall system is in a state of good repair, but each individual asset has scores. Okay. So we use this data to go into the MTA capital needs inventory. We published this first in 2019. This was a requirement per legislation that we put it out there, and it'd be updated every 3 years. So the most recent document is from 2022. It does capture and quantify the unconstrained capital needs over a 10-year period. You can see here from the 2022 document that the needs averaged out to about $512 million per year. And at the time was, I think, 98% funded. I will note some of the external factors I mentioned before, inflation, labor costs have increased that, so the updated document will definitely have a higher number than what it was previously. I should also note this does not include the purple line. So those purple line availability payments that are coming in, it doesn't include anything for the lots. We do have their asset management data as well, and we work with them on that, or any the freight rail that MTA does own. So I've hit on some of this already, but did just want to highlight some external factors that do impact MTA's budget. So that national labor context is really important. I think we're finally kind of coming out of it, but there has been a national operator shortage for the past couple of years. We've all seen it here locally. I'm not gonna call out some of the counties, but school buses have had these issues. It has been in the news. It's been a thing that's impacted us. It's impacted MTA's reliability. So our main focus over the past year has been increasing our hiring and getting more operators in the door so that we can improve reliability. It's still a very tight labor market. I think we've seen some of the numbers that continue to come out. There's more jobs than there are people who are seeking jobs. And so we have to make sure that we are being aggressive at where we recruit, how we recruit, and make sure that we're competitive with our salaries and benefits. There are some industry specific challenges too. Transit, again, this is a national conversation that we're all having regarding those increasing costs and revenues going down. Inflation has had a big impact. Construction inflation since 2020 has, especially in the transit industry, has hit about 50%. So we're seeing just huge spikes in inflation in the transit industry. So we have more money than we've ever had, which is fantastic. And it's costing us more to do things. So something that, again, as we look long term, that we all have to grapple with. Specific MTA challenges. So, our system, you live in the region, you all see it. It is showing symptoms of many, many years, decades really, of deferred maintenance and decreased staffing levels. We have a number of assets that are approaching or past their useful life. We have a lack of redundancy in our equipment that does lead to service disruptions. And then we do perform our preventive maintenance. We're meeting all the requirements, but we don't always do it early enough or at levels that extend it past its useful life, mostly just because we don't have the staff available to do that. So what does that mean for our riders? Basically, more emergency repairs, reduced service reliability, increased backlog, and longer wait times for our riders. We are doing things, right? We're taking action. We're trying to move as best we can. So, we have increased our organizational capacity to deliver capital projects. We've added some PINs positions to our procurement office. We added a new director of capital programming and asset management to better tie the asset management and capital programming data together. We've added some capital program support staff. We're using consultants quite a bit to supplement in planning and engineering and help us speed up that process. On the project management side, we established a project management oversight office that is responsible for ensuring our projects stay on budget, stay on schedule, and minimize disruption to our riders. One of the big things that we've done with that office is sometimes we would have different teams working separately. And so I have this project that's going to impact Mandalman, and I have this project that's going to impact Mandalman, but we're not talking. And so it's like, do it all at the same time, right? If we're going to mess up life for our riders, let's make sure we're doing it together, being efficient, and doing it as quickly as possible. We're also really, again, focusing on that customer experience. We want to make sure that as we do these projects, as we move forward, so we've established that Office of Customer Experience that I mentioned is going to bring in the voice of the rider as we develop projects. And we've launched our customer experience dashboard.
Let me ask you a question just for clarification. On the slide right before, you said that state of good repair and being able to do the preventive maintenance early enough and at levels so that we can extend the assets past the useful life, but we just don't have the staff. So are we asking for more maintenance staff? Because our vacancy rate is low too. So I just wanna, for clarification purposes.
Yes, so short answer. So MTA, we put out a salary and staffing report last year at the request of the General Assembly. It highlighted MTA is a very lean organization. So, our overhead, our support staff is, we're half of what WMATA does, just, in terms of overhead. We do not have as many people doing the work. We have asked for additional positions. The secretary put in the budget for FY25 an additional 109 positions. We still need more. Long term, we need to staff up as an agency to be able to deliver the program that we need for the region.
Let me follow up on that and broaden it just a little bit. I think one of the things the commission would benefit from, and I understand if it's not possible to do it today, but what you're describing there are some numbers, but it's a lot of sort of observations, you know, the more qualitative than quantitative. And for example, does MTA know how much it more ought to have to achieve those things? How, you know, is there a number that says, we've done the math and actually to achieve state of good repair, if not perfection, but at least, you know, acceptable state of good repair, we would need this much in this year and the years going forward. How much, you know, in operating, because I think it's gonna be important for us to put some numbers on the table so that people understand the scope and the scale, and as we start to, you know, discuss this more broadly. So, you know, again, if you don't have it today, I understand, I know there are some numbers in here, but it would be useful if you could, you know, and you've seen, the commissioners have seen a letter that we sent to you with some questions that start to get at those kinds of things, like just, you know, how do you know how much you need? How much do you need? You know, how does it compare to what you have, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if you could sort of put that on your to-do list and get it back to us so that we can start to understand the actual scope and scale of the problem, that would be very helpful.
Yeah, I think that's a great conversation.
Yeah,
Yeah, so we, yes, absolutely, and I think that's a great conversation for future meetings. I mean, again, you can see what we had in 2022. We have updated numbers and we'll be happy to share those in future meetings.
Thank you.
And maybe
Celeste.
piggybacking, do you have any data about how like our operating budget compares to peer agencies of similar size?
Yep, we can share that as well.
Oh, I'm sorry, like,
I had a question that I think lives somewhere between your building out of the Office of Customer Experience, which I understand is new, and then kind of the data points you shared to us earlier. Basically, the core bus service seemed to be one of the lower performance metrics, and yet it is as you said at the beginning, the biggest ridership where the, you know, bulk of the service is. So in terms of impact and experience, it's pretty outsized. So the question I have is, as we are looking at these metrics over time, trying to tell a story for making the case of why funding and resourcing is important. One thing I didn't see when you went through like the macro impacts is how economic restructuring is happening, commercial markets have changed. That's not just office, I mean, retail, industrial. Have you started down the track, or perhaps it's the role of the commission, to try and parallel the changes from an economic structure of like perhaps total trips and transit trips? And while those numbers have gone down, as a proportion of total trips, have they held their own? Have they actually increased? Because we know that the commuting patterns have changed as part of that economic restructuring. So one of the questions I have is, how are we overlaying those kind of disparate data sources? Because you have a wealth of data that are, as it should be, very transit rider driven, but I think we're missing an opportunity to give context to what is the role of transit inside of these changes, and where's the opportunity to deliver more ROI?
Yeah, I think that's something we can bring at future meetings. I will note in terms of the changing nature of trips, so we have done some changes to our schedules to reflect that, of like when people are traveling. It's not as much, you know, 6 to 9 a.m. and 4 to 6 p.m. There's more midday trips, and so we've adjusted a lot of our bus schedules. So instead of kind of a spike in the morning, spike in the evening, it stays fairly level all day to reflect the need for that. We're also really focused, working with MDOT, on transit-oriented development. You know, we have this fantastic investment that we made in rail, and it's being underutilized, and so we need to get better at that. So MDOT has studies out for the core core Baltimore system, as well as the Penn line, to look at how we can focus what the market needs on improving development, multimodal development around our stations, and really kind of driving transit ridership in that way.
yes, Mike, sorry.
So, with the development of the technology and you know, and the MTA want to attract people back to riding. And one thing we haven't touched on is like, has that, you know, I know there's been a survey like for safety concerns. And you know, you want people to feel safe on the rides. But we're coming into where buses are now coming, you're purchasing buses Is the technology on those buses for like cameras or different things to make riders feel safe, is that also included in budget, in that budget plan?
Yeah, so we have a number of cameras on each of our buses. It does audio and visual. We've changed the location of the cameras on the buses. So when you first get in, you kind of get that like target experience of you see yourself getting in on the camera with a goal of decreasing crime on buses, right? Like big, hey, you are on camera, making sure folks are aware of that. MTA police do a fantastic job as well of keeping crime off the system. If it does happen, our clearance rate is much higher than many of our surrounding jurisdictions. And they do really focus on that. So, but I understand the perception of safety. And so that's another thing we are working towards is, we launched an anti-harassment campaign last fall or 2 falls ago. And so we want to take that to the next level, change how people can report what's going on buses. Sometimes you may not feel comfortable calling police. So is there a way to text, or is there an app or something that folks can use? We're also going to be coming out with a rider code of conduct. So letting people know what is and is not acceptable on transit vehicles and pushing that pretty hard. And I do want to note perception of safety. So I'm a daily rider. I've been riding for the past 10 years. I ride with my 8-year-old and 2-year-old. If it wasn't safe, I wouldn't be taking them on the system. But we ride at all times of day, at night, all the different modes. I've never had an issue on our system. It is very safe. Yes, things do happen, but things do happen across the state and the region.
I think we interrupted you in some way, so please.
That is actually the end of my presentation, so. Any other questions?
Other questions? So I'll just sort of reiterate, and I would use the letter that we sent as a bit of a guide. I know it reflects mine, and I think probably others' views about what we need to know in order to be as productive as possible, right? And so it's inevitable, and this has been a good overview in every respect, but we've got to start diving deeper to understand numbers, gaps, in order to be advocates for that, and also to understand the scope of the problem. I think everybody understands qualitatively it's a problem. I think everybody sort of understood 3.5 billion, although that was hard to digest for the whole system. But I think information like that would be really helpful. And we're just gonna have to keep working as commissioners to understand the various moving parts here. Again, some of us come with more understanding, some with less, but I think soon enough, we should all try and get up to the same sort of level. A couple of more housekeeping follow-ups. Can we have these slides, please?
Don will send them out.
So if you send those out, yeah, perfect. Also, what would be useful as a follow-up, and I know we're gonna turn to other things, but and we can talk about this, Don, you and I could talk about this, but I think sort of a little guide that sort of says to, it's like, I know you've done a pretty good sort of orientation manual, and we should look at it, maybe this does much of it. But I think it's a sort of like, you should look at this, and you should look at this, and you should look at a little curriculum that people can in their own time sort of go through to help educate themselves about the various pieces, and then we can answer questions about them. So people, I can imagine time in the next meeting where someone might say, I read the so-and-so, and I'm not really sure exactly how that fits into the, just because I want people to really dig in. The other thing I wanted to say is we will, and we're going to talk about administrative stuff, I know, but we will be doing field visits, tours, whatever. So that'll probably be in between and addition to meetings, but I think this is for us to understand the system. We need to get out and see, ride the modes. I know some people already do ride the modes, go to the, to the bus divisions, really sort of see what this looks like. And frankly, I also think that MTA staff ought to know that we exist if they don't already, and see us, in addition to the senior staff who are inevitably going to come to these meetings. So, it's going to take some time and effort, and I know you're all volunteers, so we'll try and be as reasonable as possible, but we want to provide opportunities for you to get up to speed as quickly as possible on things you can study at home, but also things that you can't really get unless we're out there in the field. And so we'll look to do those things as well. So yeah, just a few notes I jotted down during time. So Don, we're back to you, I think, for the agenda. Oh, let me just, before we do that.
We did have one question from.
Oh, we did, good.
Yes, from
Excellent.
Tony.
Please.
I'll read it here.
Yep.
She asked, no. It's not a question, it's a statement. She needs to leave, so.
Tony, we'll see you soon. Are there any other remaining questions? You've heard a lot. Some of these things all ping pong off each other, so it might be that a question from something earlier, so before we sort of turn to more next steps and organizational sort of things, questions for Holly, for Don, for me, about Aaron.
I just want to commend Holly and her team on the command and control of your situational awareness as an agency, kind of data that you're tracking, the best practices that you're showing. I mean, I think not too often do you hear that. I think you hear more people criticizing the system. So this information you presented here today was very helpful, and I know there's a lot of your team members behind you, kind of making sure that that's all reported out. But that just shows to me, and it gives me confidence that we have a good sense of situational awareness as an agency and kind of taking that information and seeing if we can improve upon it and then direct it in the right way. So just want to thank you for that.
Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, we have a fantastic team at MTA.
Thanks. Others, before we turn back to Don? Okay, Don.
Thank you. I just wanted to restate the need that the commission does need to develop bylaws and procedures for operations. We'll be creating a draft of that for you, but I would be grateful for anyone who's willing to spend the time to help us do that. And so if they could, be prepared to review some drafts and comment, that would be great. Don't need to raise your hand now, but I can. You can get back to me if you would. We did want to go over the dates for future meetings. And we're doing very well on time, by the way.
Hey, Don, I'm gonna steal back a few minutes of the time you've given me because one thing I realized is I didn't give Holly the chance to tell us what keeps her up at night. And so that would be my, Holly.
Apologize, I should have put that.
No, perfectly fine.
I mean, mostly my 2-year-old who still doesn't sleep through the night, but
I knew that was coming. I knew that was coming.
other than that, I mean, again, very people focused, but employee safety, Mike did ask about safety. Operator assaults have been on the rise across the country. Again, not unique to MTA, but it has occurred at MTA, and so making sure that our operators are safe when we put them out there. We've had some very unfortunate situations where operators have died doing their job, and so that should never happen, and so that's obviously a big one. Reliability for riders, I do ride the system, when I'm out there and I see people waiting, I'm like, I always look, like, when's that next bus gonna come? I wanna make sure that we're providing the service that is reliable. Getting to a system where we have the system of choice, it means first being reliable and then improving our frequency, right? Like, those are the kind of two main things that we need to do, and we're not there yet, and so I really wanna focus on that. And then again, longer term, that funding stability to ensure the system is in a state of good repair. You have a number of assets where if they go down, not to come back to light rail, but we have our traction power substations on light rail. If any one of them goes down at any point, we won't have light rail on that portion of the system. We have funding, it's been deferred, and so we are moving forward, but we are at risk, and will have an impact on our riding lives. Even then, with the system, because of lack of redundancy, I was at the stadium, not at the game, but watching to make sure our light rail system was working well this past weekend. The team did a great job. But we can't.
Which team was that?
The MTA team, sorry, the Ravens did not, the MTA team did a great job.
Thanks for clarifying.
I get a lot of pushback of like, well, why can't you just stack up trains like outside of the station and bring them in? If I put too many trains in that one track circuit, we blow it. Like, that's kind of where we're at right now. So I have to be very careful of where and when I say the team, the OCC team, where the trains are placed, and be careful. You can't put too many in one area at a time, or we will blow it. So there's just a lot of things that we're kind of managing around. And so the importance of that funding stability long-term for SGR and the impact it has on our riders is really important.
Thanks. Thank you very much. I'm sorry, I'm sorry for jumping around. but
No,
Don,
no, that's important. We have sent out tentative dates for upcoming meetings and tentative outline for the commission's work. It should be in your mail out there, in your package in front of you. And I wanted to have a conversation about that, and are we missing anything? Are there dates that are bad for you? Are there better dates if that's the case?
well, I think we're never gonna get it perfect. I think you should let Don know, your calendars, if you haven't seen them, and if there's a real problem, then we'll deal with it. I think we're gonna assume that March 8th is fixed in the next date, and beyond that, we will have some flexibility. The other thing about the schedule, and it's something that I think still needs some discussion, is how often we're gonna meet. And my view is that we ought to meet monthly, at least through the session, which is why there's a March meeting. We might also consider an April meeting. We just need to sort this out. I mean, we obviously don't wanna meet just to meet, right? Of course. But every 2 months seems a little unsatisfying when you're trying to ramp things up. And I'm trying to be mindful of balance people's schedules and volunteer commitment and so on against that. We do have in June, July, August, tours. I don't think we would necessarily have no meeting during the summer, even though it's traditional perhaps to take some sort of a break. I think it's just gonna depend a little bit on how the work plan evolves. I welcome your comments on that. I think I'm just trying to figure that out. There's no magic to it. Does anybody have any strong feelings one way or the other on the subject?
Yes, so I would agree with you. I think, we can figure out the summer dates, but I do think April would make sense. And then a question, are we in early parts to the March and may look good? Are we at the same time? Are we saying 10 o'clock?
Yes.
Okay. But yeah, I would advocate for an April, particularly for the ramp up, and we certainly probably setting in a June, and maybe if there's a July, August for a tour, but those two changes may give us at least more.
You'll see in there, if you match up the schedule of the charge, Don has tried to do a good job of dealing with things that are cyclical, that happen at a certain time. He knows that system well, so he's gonna kind of keep us on track. But we have our own agenda set, in addition to the cycle that's driven by that. We have frankly the stuff that we wanna do, that we wanna get done, and the time that we wanna do it. I forget, can someone remind me when Sine Die is in Annapolis? April. So we should set that date, even if it means slipping a bit after Sine Die, so we have can report, not here's what we think is gonna happen, but rather here's what happened. So as soon as possible after that date, if possible.
That was, my thinking was May would be the earliest, giving people that go to session. I know they're pretty burned out by the end of session, so they usually take the 2 weeks after to recover, so.
Well, okay,
The one thing that is missing, I would say, is service changes and in the spring, and we'll fit that in there. So that might be that May meeting.
I think April, May timeframe would be a good time to talk about the fall service changes, because that's right around when they'll be coming out. I'd also like to introduce our Be More bus. It's our kind of, how do we improve the bus system long-term? What are the needs for that? And that would be a good meeting there too.
Karen?
Yeah, maybe we consider this for the April meeting, but I know we're having conversations on lots, but it might be helpful to just have a report out or a meeting with the regional local governments, from their perspective, what they're thinking about, what their CTPs, their challenges are. I mean, hear directly from, the planners, and the transportation coordinators in the respective jurisdictions that we all represent. It's one thing to have a CTP kind of out there, but it's another thing to actually have an engaged discussion with the local governments, and maybe we kind of build that in somewhere. So, thank you.
That's a good idea. Yes?
Yeah, one other question, maybe aligning with that. Would it also be an idea to have like one session with MDOT specifically and saying like, how do we fit in all the different business units, and say like, hey, we specifically focus on that, maybe even with MDOT leadership, maybe further in the year when we are better equipped, but then we can have our recommendations maybe also being reviewed with their leadership.
Good thought. Okay, well, thanks for the feedback. And again, you know, if you have supplemental thoughts, you know, don't text the drive and let us know on the way.
Thank you.
Yep, done. So, okay.
So we're at resource documents. I wanted to take a minute to introduce Jake Shutt and Ashley Roach, who are also with
Come on out
me,
here so folks can see.
supporting you and trying to make your life a little easier as we kind of dive deeper into this stuff. So if you have questions, concerns, issues, obviously you can always get in touch with me or any of the members of the team here. So I just wanted to introduce them.
Thank you.
Yes.
Is it possible to set up like a Google Drive or something like that, where or something else, like a shared file maybe that they can help us with, so that we can all have access to the same document?
Yeah, we can do that. Sure.
Yeah.
Sounds good. We have provided you with an orientation manual, and I think that to those of you I've spoken to about it, we intend that to be an evolving document as the commission's mission evolves and members churn. We already had one come and go in the brief history even before we started here. The intent there is that it serves as a baseline for everybody and helps you kind of understand the mission and communicate among yourselves. So look for updates to that. We'll be sending out a version that has MTA's org chart in it and some updated narrative. We are in the process of developing a primer for the lots system. So we'll be able to, it'll serve as a baseline for you all to learn about the locally operated transit systems in the region. We hope to have a presentation to you at some point in the future on that, and so stay tuned. And that is all I had.
Yep, we have the remaining item on the agenda is public participation. I don't know how we're managing that virtually, but I think we have a process to make sure that anybody who wants to be heard can be.
Yes, we do. We had one question come in online. But I don't believe anybody in the room has signed up to speak.
There's two online questions.
Two online questions. Thank you, Jake. Yes. Right. This question is to you, Holly. Administrator Arnold. Is MTA doing what it can to retain the CDL drivers from cut commuter routes, since CDLs are so scarce and we need to retain drivers where we can? Hopefully they can be moved to core service from commuter service, since on time and headway performance in the city isn't great.
I mean, obviously, we welcome anyone to apply. The commuter bus proposal is still just that, it's a proposal. We need to go through public hearings. A lot of the commuter bus providers also, like we're in Southern Maryland or other parts of the state where it may not make sense to drive a couple hours to then get on the bus and drive more. But again, we fully welcome anyone who would like to apply for jobs.
They're not MTA employees, correct?
They're contractors.
Employees of a contract.
Perhaps they could become them.
Yeah, no, that's.
We would fully welcome if they would like to apply.
Another question for you. Will all coaches' trains be updated with ADA compliant visual stop announcements for deaf and hard of hearing riders?
So the ADA does not require that, but it is something that we are incorporating in our new buses and trains as we purchase them. So it's something we want to do. We know it helps with accessibility, and so we're going to continue to push towards that.
Thank you. That's all we have, Mr. Chair.
Well, I just want to thank, I'm really excited, even more so than at the beginning. This is a great group of people. So congratulations to all of you, and thanks for doing this. And to those who appointed you, whether the governor, county executives, others, Representative Labor, this is a really good group. And I think we're gonna be able to make a lot of progress. I just, my approach to these things is, what's very exciting about this, frankly, is that we're sort of inventing this together. Right, it's not like, hey, you've been appointed to this commission, here's how it's worked for the last 15 years with big ocean liner, see if we can figure out how to move it in the direction. We're making this up as we go. It's absolutely essential to have this function in the state for a long time. So again, thanks to
Former delegate.
Former delegate Bridges, Assistant Secretary Bridges for BMC in teeing that up. This is a really important step. But what I want everybody to do, please, and I see no trouble having listened and to what everybody's been saying. We need to own this together. Everybody needs to own this. Between meetings, it's not just a show up at the meeting kind of thing. We've got to figure out how to drive this agenda, how to drive this commission, how to make it as useful as possible for the many, many, many people who in all sorts of ways are depending on the outcome of this kind of work. So I really, please think about that. We will figure out other ways to engage you, whether it's subcommittees or working groups or task force. I don't really know yet. And I think we should try and figure that out together, where it's possible to have sort of a couple of interested people that are interested in, I'm just making it up, employee satisfaction, retention, sort of staff issues. That's a bucket that someone might be interested in. So we want to figure out, and I want to hear from you as this evolves, where you feel that either your skills or your passions just happen to be, and we'll figure out how to engage those. But I just, I see it already, but I want to keep encouraging a real sense of ownership of this, because it's really up to us to make this commission everything that it can be, which means the statutory charge and more, in order to really make a difference for this important system. It is a tough time, and I don't know what we're gonna do to fund it all. Hopefully, with our encouragement, what the Train Commission is doing, and with real leadership from the governor, legislative leaders, and others, we will get there. But it's gonna take some real effort. So I just wanna thank you again, give the commissioners an opportunity for any last words.
Commissioner.
Yes.
I want to, on behalf of the commission, just want to thank you for stepping up. It's not it is not an easy job. I think as most of us know, it's a heavy burden to take on. And so I think we collectively appreciate your willingness to lean in and go down this road and as you said, build it as we go along. So no playbook, but appreciate your service.
And I do expect to testify at the MTA budget hearings on March the 1st and 4th. Which will be before our next meeting, so hopefully I'll be able to convey some of your thoughts, which I've taken notes on, and just figure out how to, I want to use that opportunity to both convey a message and also to convey that we exist, we're here, we're not going anywhere, and we are serious about having an impact on the landscape. So hopefully we can manage all of that in 2 minutes, I'll be allotted. So anything else? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you very much.